strange corner of the internet. Some use it to share advice, to tell jokes, to connect with strangers. But sometimes it reveals something darker, stories that stay with you, stories you wish you never read. Tonight we're diving into some of the most disturbing posts in Reddit's history. Real people, real experiences, the kind of stories that haunt you long after you've closed the page. Enjoy.
The subreddit r/relationship advice is a place where people turn for help. Sometimes for advice about their partner, sometimes about family, and sometimes to confess things they've never said out loud to anyone else. Most of the posts are ordinary. Disagreements at home, arguments between couples, the small struggles of everyday life. But every so often, a story appears that is different, darker, more disturbing. 6 years ago, an anonymous user, posting under a throwaway account, shared a confession about her father. It wasn't about fights at the dinner table. It wasn't about neglect or words left unsaid. It was something much worse, something that left her terrified of the man she grew up with. The post reads as follows.
So my dad has always been a kind of strange guy, but I never really noticed. I was used to it, and that's just who he is. He isn't mean, but doesn't talk much. Very busy with work, doesn't seem to be interested in anyone's life, that kind of thing. When I was a kid, gradually, our relatives stopped visiting. My dad wasn't in contact with his family, but my moms used to be around a lot. Then they stopped. I remember hearing my mom fighting with her parents a couple times. I gathered they didn't like my dad. I haven't seen my cousins in years. We used to be close as kids. I was never one for social media, but recently reactivated my Facebook and decided to look up some of my relatives on a whim. I messaged my cousin I was closest to, 18 female, also my aunt, her mom, 40s female. My cousin didn't seem to know why we hadn't seen each other, but my aunt said I should ask my mom. It wasn't the sort of thing I should hear from her. Mind you, I'd asked my mom before a few times. She always said they were too busy to visit. I was really confused, and we ended up having a long conversation yesterday. I had to insist on a real answer. Now, I am horrified at what I found out. Her family is freaked out by my dad because a few years ago, when they came for dinner, this was a bunch of people, not just my aunt and cousin. They found out what he'd said was beef was actually kangaroo meat. My mom had specifically gone out of her way to make the meal herself because she knew my dad had done this before. So she banned him from cooking. But he secretly swapped the meats during some point she wasn't in the kitchen. She admitted to her family he was constantly doing this to us. Yeah, now I know I've eaten a ton of gross dung he'd said was beef or chicken. And whenever I didn't like something, it's probably because it wasn't what he said. She told me that he's been obsessed with trying exotic meats for years. Now, looking back, I remember times I saw weird unlabeled meat packages in the basement freezer. I just never thought to inspect it. She said he has spent thousands and thousands of dollars in getting them. They are rare and cost a lot, plus travel costs, and paying off his contacts who pass information about where he can find whatever he's looking for. It's driven my parents to the verge of financial ruin multiple times. My mom also said they've nearly divorced a few times. I used to hear them fighting sometimes as a kid. Now I guess I know why. You're probably thinking, he just has adventurous tastes and this can't be that bad. so I'll give the full picture of everything she told me. Some of the things he's had are weird to standard Americans, but I realize might not be that weird in other places. A kangaroo, and horse for example, wolf, camel, shark fin soup. Some is questionable, I guess, such as something called ortolan bunting, look it up, and seafood eaten while still alive. And some of it is straight up illegal. Like she said, he once unalived and ate a bald eagle. He hunts normal game, which I knew, but also protected species. He's obtained bushmeat, meat from African wildlife that's illegally imported here. This includes stuff like rats, various monkeys, chimpanzee, apes and gorillas, pangolin, porcupine, civets, and giraffe. And what my mom knows, he bought these from some markets in NYC that sold it in immigrant communities. It became even worse with other exotic animals. He has gone so far as to travel to other countries, specifically to hunt or get meat from particular animals. These have included zebra, cheetah, elephant, hippo, Bengal tiger, endangered rhino, in places in Southeast Asia and Africa. He went somewhere in the Caribbean to hunt and eat dolphin, Brazil for anaconda. My mom says that a trip he's going on next month to China is specifically to try to find a way of eating Chinese salamander and panda meat. These are both very endangered species. It's seriously illegal there to unalive pandas. That's not something Chinese people actually eat, but he's determined to do it. He's been like that about some of the other ones I mentioned, that are also rare or under protected status, like some types of gorillas and orangutans. Who hears of an endangered animal and thinks, I want to eat that? What the heck? Oh, and he also wants to go to the Antarctic to hunt penguin and whatever else is there before the ice melts. He's already been to the Arctic and eaten stuff there, apparently. My mom has to snoop on his laptop to keep an eye on what he's doing since he stopped talking about it. He knows she doesn't approve, but she can't do anything. They just pretend it's not happening, and she reads his emails with context whenever he mentions needing to go on a trip for work. She says it sounds like these people are involved in foreign animal trade networks. He's very secretive. She has to deliberately wait for a minute. He's in the bathroom with the computer logged in. She's been terrified for years that any day he's going to get arrested. They, my mom and younger siblings, rely on my dad's salary. My mom is disabled with a chronic illness and cannot work, so would only have disability checks to get by on. There's more she didn't even tell me because it wasn't appropriate, and she refused when I said I could handle it. But I can only imagine what else he's done. I don't know what to do. My family is on the brink of falling apart, and I never knew. I will never look at my dad the same again. This is really disgusting to me. My mom can't divorce him because they rely on him. She won't talk to her family about it because they just tell her to divorce. I know she's very anxious, but I feel like I've almost lost respect for her because she knew the whole time and never at least warned me. I'm also pretty sure she has lied to me, saying we never had a cat when I was little. Except, I remember it. And I don't remember what happened to it. Which, now I'm sick thinking maybe my dad did something. My mom insisted I was thinking of someone else's cat. But there is a photo of me as a little girl with that cat on my bed. I'm in college, on the other side of the country, and only home for a few more days. My mom made me promise to never say a word to my dad. He'd end me. This is all so f***ed up to me. I'm really worried about them and what they'll do if he's caught. Also, what the fuck is wrong with him?
The story left readers disturbed. Some speculated that the father may have gone even further than the daughter realized, that perhaps he had even tried human meat, and maybe even served it to his own family. Others believed his obsession went beyond curiosity, not simply an interest in unusual foods, but a sign of something deeply broken. There are people who collect experiences, countries they've visited, meals they've eaten. For some, it's a hobby. For him, it seemed more like an addiction, one that consumed his money, his marriage, and possibly his sanity. And then there was the detail that unsettled people most. The way he forced his family into his obsession, hiding exotic and even pest meat in their dinners, making them unwilling participants in his secret. For many, that crossed the line from addiction into fetish. Speculation only grew when the daughter mentioned his planned trip to China. It was around the time COVID was spreading, and some wondered if he ever made it back at all. But after the post went viral, the user vanished. No updates, no closure, just questions. Munchausen syndrome. It's a complex mental disorder where individuals adopt the role of a sick patient to gain attention, sympathy, and care. For some, it can be as harmless as exaggerating a minor illness. But in its most extreme form, it becomes life-threatening. And in the case of Kelly Ronahan, that is exactly what happened. Kelly was born in Kelowna, Canada. She trained as a ballet dancer, later working as an instructor. At one point, her future looked bright. In 2014, she began sharing her life online. Her Instagram under the handle differentially Kelly featured normal snapshots of her life. Her cat, her dancing, her smiling selfies. But that same year, everything changed. Kelly began claiming she needed regular blood transfusions to survive. According to her, her hemoglobin levels were dangerously low. Without transfusions, she would die. She told her followers she required 3 bags of blood every 2 weeks. Very quickly, she became a local figure of sympathy. Blood drives were organized in her honor. She even began volunteering for a donation charity. Local news covered her story, praising her resilience. She was presented as an inspiring young woman whose life depended on the kindness of strangers. But doctors treating her grew skeptical. Blood tests repeatedly came back normal, sometimes even high. They saw inconsistencies in her story. At one point, she was hospitalized after what she described as seizures. Doctors concluded they were faked. Despite this, Kelly's online support only grew stronger. For every doctor who doubted her, there were hundreds of strangers sending gifts, donations, and encouragement. She was called brave, strong, and inspiration. Every shred of skepticism was drowned out by validation. This cycle, medical suspicion followed by online sympathy, only reinforced her behavior. By 2017, her story shifted. She claimed she had developed infections and sepsis after complications with her IV port. She described graphic medical details in her posts. She also began talking about scars, self-harm, and eating disorders. Many noticed her photos didn't match her timeline. Scars, she said, were old, looked far too fresh. Even then, her followers supported her, sending words of comfort, prayers, gifts. But Kelly, the attention never stopped.
By 2018, her focus had moved almost entirely to her legs. She began posting photos of blisters and sores, claiming they appeared suddenly and without explanation. At first, they looked like small scabs, but over time, they worsened.
Her photos became graphic, showing large open wounds that refused to heal. Doctors suspected she was deliberately picking at her skin to create and worsen the injuries. A classic sign of Munchausen's, but Kelly dismissed this. She insisted she was suffering from autoimmune conditions or other unexplained medical problems. Some of her videos disturbed viewers even more. In one, onions were taped to her wounds as a supposed treatment. In another, she showed blistered hands and insisted doctors could not explain them. She also reportedly used dangerous chemicals on her wounds to make them worse. Users claimed she went even further, doing things to herself that were too disturbing to describe here. If you choose to look into it, do so with caution. The images and videos are extremely unsettling. By this point, her online presence was enormous. She posted frequently on Reddit, and her name became a constant subject of discussion on a subreddit called r/illnessfakers. There, her timeline was dissected in detail. Every inconsistency was pointed out. Yet Kelly kept going, and if anything, the scrutiny seemed to fuel her even more. By 2019, her decline was dramatic. She underwent skin grafts to try to repair the damage to her legs. Briefly, she posted optimistically about recovery, but the wounds always returned. She picked at them again, leaving gaping holes. Her mobility declined rapidly. She could barely walk. One day, she wore shorts to her psychiatrist appointment, so the doctor could see her legs. The psychiatrist was horrified and immediately called her dermatologist. Not long after, she was involuntarily committed for 2 days, so doctors could intervene. But nothing changed. Her fear of medical procedures grew even as she begged for more transfusions. She desperately wanted pain medication, but doctors refused. They knew numbing her pain would only encourage further self-harm. By the end of the year, she could no longer walk. Her muscles and tendons had stopped healing. Circulation in her legs was failing. Her body was shutting down. By 2020, Kelly's condition was irreversible. She described unbearable pain and extreme difficulty walking. Each update showed her in a worse state than before. By 2021, her actions had finally caught up with her. The years of picking, tearing, and worsening her own wounds left doctors with no choice. The infections were spreading, her circulation was gone, and her legs could no longer be saved. Surgeons amputated both of her legs above the knee. The only option left, to stop the destruction she had caused to her own body. After the surgery, her life seemed to change. Losing her legs was devastating, both physically and emotionally. But for a brief moment, she appeared to begin healing. She posted videos of herself leaving the hospital, returning home, even smiling. She seemed happy, as if the nightmare might finally be over. But beneath that smile, her condition never truly disappeared. It simply went into hiding. The surgeries should have been the end of her story, but they weren't. Kelly's struggles didn't stop when her legs were gone. Reports surfaced that she had begun pulling out her own hair. Later, she even pulled out her own teeth. The cycle of self-destruction had simply shifted. At one point, she had received more than 90 liters of blood from over 50 donors. She had been featured in news stories, podcasts, countless Reddit threads, but all of that attention came at a cost. What began with a young woman claiming to need transfusions spiraled into years of fabricated illness, self-inflicted wounds, amputations, and continued harm to herself. Today, Kelly Ronahan is remembered not for her ballet, not for her dancing, but as one of the internet's most infamous cases of Munchausen syndrome. Her story played out across Instagram, in hospital rooms, and on Reddit threads like Illness Fakers, a public unraveling documented in real time, until her body finally gave out. Some people feel sorry for her, but the majority despise her actions. They say she wasted enormous amounts of medical care, blood that could have saved the lives of others, and ultimately destroyed her own life in the process.
Subreddit r/confessions is a corner of Reddit where people reveal things they'd never admit to anyone in their real lives. It's a place for secrets, for regrets, for hidden thoughts. Anything from harmless confessions to the darkest parts of human nature. Among the thousands of posts, one stands apart. 6 years ago, a user going by the name Crazysonthrowoff shared a story that shocked everyone who read it. A confession so heavy, so unsettling, that it continues to disturb readers even now. This is that story.
My son was very troubled, very troubled. If you have seen the movie We Need to Talk About Kevin, it will really help to understand what I'm talking about. Because I swear to God, when I watched that film, I thought I was watching a documentary of my life. I felt like the writer must have had cameras hidden in my damn house. That's how accurate it was. The only difference is that in the movie, the boy appears normal to his father and only reveals his true nature to his mother. With my son, he didn't have that mask. His insane behavior was the same with everyone. From the day he was born, my son just came out wrong. He was planned. My wife and I tried to get pregnant and were ecstatic when he was born. He was wanted and loved. We showered affection on him and really tried to give him a happy childhood. But from the day we brought him home from the hospital, he was miserable. He cried for 13 months straight. I'm not exaggerating. 13 months without a break. He cried until he had no voice left and kept crying. You could see his little face scrunched up and no sound coming out, totally hoarse. There were times he would literally be crying in his sleep. I've never seen or heard of any other kid able to do that. We brought him to doctors, specialists, tried changing his diet, held him, rocked him, toys, swaddling, music, mobiles, everything we could think of. Nothing worked. 13 months of grating, grinding, no sleep hell. Once he got over the crying stage, we thought we were out of the woods, but it quickly became clear that for some unknown reason, he was just angry at being alive. I never saw that kid have a genuine, joyous smile once in the time I knew him. I saw him grin, a vicious, horrible grin, many times, taking a perverse pleasure from causing pain or suffering or breaking a rule. But a smile from real pleasure at something nice? No, never, not once. He had no interest in anything positive. He was fueled by hate, and everything he did was bent toward that. As soon as he could walk, his mission in life was to destroy things. He would break, or try to break, anything that came in his range. Smash it. Chew it. Throw it in the toilet. Whatever he could. After a while, he figured out how to get his diaper off. and took great pleasure in leaving dung and piss anywhere he could. After a while, he figured out he could hide it and started leaving dung and pee in places we wouldn't find right away, grinding it into carpets, making it even more of a problem to clean, and making the house stink. When he got older, ages 9 to 15, we'd leave dung and pee in our bed until we got a lock on our door and he wasn't able to get in anymore. Then he'd just take a dump in the hallway in front of our room. That biological warfare started around 2.5 years old, and he never grew out of it. I'll try to speed it up, as I could literally go on for days about this stuff. But as he grew older, he became more and more unmanageable. He would bite, kick, scream, scratch, and spit at anyone trying to do anything with him. He was kicked out of school twice before he was 9, then they let him back in, and then kicked him out for good. He had to change schools. The next one put him in a special class that kept him away from the other students. We had to install a door and lock on the kitchen because he would steal knives and use them to gouge the walls, the furniture, or chase people with them. When he was 10, he stabbed me pretty good in the hip and bottom. I still have the scars. As he grew older, he grew darker. He moved into setting things on fire and torturing local animals. There was a stray dog that hung out around the park near our house. My son blinded it in one eye with a BBQ fork. He would dip cats' tails in gasoline and light them on fire. He became a violent, stinking, vicious beast that lived in our house. We couldn't do anything with him. I will take this opportunity to preempt the tsunami of messages. Yes, we had the kid in fucking therapy. He saw a psychiatrist twice a week and had God knows how many different medications prescribed to him over the years. Nothing worked. Therapy didn't work. Meds didn't work. Nothing fucking worked. He was like a poison cloud of hate and fury, lashing out at anything in his reach. When my son was 16, my wife got pregnant again. I can't tell you how different our reaction was.
Instead of joy, we felt horror. This pregnancy had not been planned, and we really were at a loss over what to do. My son had been such an unending nightmare for 16 years. We couldn't take the idea of starting again from the beginning. We talked a lot about terminating, but access to abortion was not as easy in those days as it is now, and my wife was very against it. We talked about many options. In the end, we decided that my wife would have the baby, and if it turned out evil, we would put it up for adoption. We knew we just couldn't do it again with another child like our son. We had a daughter. She was normal. Suddenly we saw what our lives should have been like the whole time, how things would have been had our son not been himself. She laughed at things. She breastfed without biting. She didn't have teeth yet anyway, but you could tell she was just trying to eat, not tear her mom's breast off. After 4 months, she was sleeping through the night. She was happy. She was normal. I can't describe the relief and happiness that we both felt. I don't have the words for it. This is where I believe I may have started really pulling back for my son. Up until that time, whatever mistakes I made, I had always tried to do the best for him. I am convinced of that. I tried to help him and love him and care for him. I really tried. But when my daughter was born, my wife and I both instinctively just turned toward her. She became our focus. Not from malice, but just because she was so much easier. She was so happy and sweet. Every moment we were with her was like magic. I understand this was wrong, but we honestly couldn't help it. I don't have a better explanation than that. My son hadn't given a dung about my wife being pregnant. I honestly don't know if he really understood it. But when we brought our daughter home, he started acting out even more. I didn't think it was possible, but he took it up another notch. At this time, he was 17, and we were having blowout screaming matches daily. Usually, after we fought, he would storm out of the house and disappear for hours at a time, or come back the next morning. It was a relief. I started to actually look forward to our fights, because it would get him away from us for a while. After the birth of our daughter, my relationship with my son was almost entirely gone. Our only real interactions were screaming at each other. My wife was even worse with him. She just had nothing left. By that time, if our son even came into the same room as her, she would just stop whatever she was doing and start screaming, "Get the hell away from me! Get away! Get the hell out!" Until he left. He started spending more and more time out of the house, which was a blessing for us. I have no idea what he got up to out in the world, but we were just happy it wasn't being inflicted on us. As a consequence of our son's behavior, we had invested heavily in locks around our house. All of the cheap, thin interior doors in our home had been replaced with thick, dense wood doors that couldn't be kicked through, equipped with keyed locks that my wife and I carried keys to. I know it sounds extreme, but locks and heavy doors were the best way we had found to create safe spaces from him. And again, before I am inundated with messages, I was not locking my son in rooms like a prisoner. He had free reign of the house and could come and go as he pleased. My wife and I would lock ourselves in rooms to protect ourselves from him. If anything, we were the prisoners in our own home. On the day in question, I had fought with my son in the morning, and he had left the house in a rage. My wife and I were enjoying some peace and quiet in the kitchen, while our daughter napped in our bedroom. And then, my daughter began crying. Any parent who has young children can tell you, you get used to your child's cries, and you can tell after a while what they need. They cry differently if they are hungry, or need changing, or are just restless and want to be held. Babies can communicate pretty well before they can speak. This cry was none of those things. This cry was terror. The second we heard it, my wife and I were both up out of our chairs and running to the room. The door was locked, of course, and it took a few seconds to get the right key and get it open. My son was in the room. We lived in a bungalow, and the lunatic had climbed in the window to get to her. He was standing over her crib with a steak knife in his hand. I have no idea where he got it. It wasn't one of ours. We controlled our knives very carefully and always kept them in locked drawers. I think he may have stolen it from one of our neighbors' houses. He had broken her skin twice already, once in the belly area and once on her arm. When I entered the room, he was dragging the back of the knife down her face, not cutting, almost tickling her with it, teasing her while she screamed. He looked up at us and smiled. Before I knew what I was doing, I was already moving, running to put myself between them. I didn't think about it. I just moved instinctively. Even with that, my wife got there faster. It was like a movie on fast forward. She got to our son and bashed his hand away, knocking the knife across the room, and then shoved him with her whole body weight, so hard that he flew away from the crib and bounced off the wall. I picked up my daughter and held her, while my wife screened us. I could see her shaking, almost convulsing. I can remember the smell of the room, the sound of my daughter screaming and wailing, the look on my son's face as he stood there. Just nothing. Blank. Dead. There was nothing in his eyes. No emotion. He looked like an alien to me. I watched my wife take a step toward him. I could have reached out and stopped her, but I didn't. She stepped forward again, very close to him. I could have stopped her again, but I didn't. She waited, looking at him for maybe 3 to 5 seconds, without moving. And then she punched him in the face. Now, until this point, you may have been picturing my wife as a typical woman. Small frame, dainty, delicate. This is not the case. My wife does have a small frame, but dainty and delicate she is not. Never has been, since I've known her. Since her early teens, my wife has been a boxer. MMA didn't exist back then, but karate and boxing were big in those days. And my wife was a very talented amateur. She was about 130 pounds. She carried a lot of muscle. And she knew how to punch. I had 70 pounds on her back then. And I have no doubt that in a real fight between me and her, she could have and would have pounded me flat. Neither of us had ever laid a hand on our son in anger before. But something broke in her that day, and all the years of anger and pain and sorrow and frustration just came pouring out. When she hit him, his head snapped back, and his nose was injured badly. He hardly reacted. He just looked at her with this shocked expression, like he didn't know how to process what had just happened. She waited another second, and then she hit him again. I could have reached out and stopped her. I could have dragged her out of the room, taken her away, calmed her. I didn't. I just stood there and watched, while she systematically started to pound him to a pulp. Every time he brought his hands to cover one part, she would blast him somewhere else. Body, head, body, head, over and over. He started screaming, crying out, yelling for her to stop. It's the most genuine reaction I'd ever seen him have to anything in his whole life. But she wasn't stopping. I watched her, ramping up, hitting harder, faster, working him like a heavy bag. He tried to swing at her and she slipped him easily. She was on autopilot, sinking down into her training. I stood there watching for a minute, then I turned my back on them and took my daughter out of the room. I brought my daughter to the kitchen and gave her a bath in the sink. I found that he had cut her a third time, on the sole of her foot. All the cuts were superficial. I cleaned her up and held her until she calmed. I put polysporin and band-aids on her cuts. In our bedroom, I could hear my son screaming, calling my wife horrible names, threatened to harm her in horrible ways. After a while, I didn't hear him saying anything anymore. Didn't even hear him crying out. I assumed that he must have been knocked out, but I could still hear her beating him. That went on for a long time, long enough for my daughter to drift off to sleep in my arms. I just sat at the kitchen table, waiting for her to finish. Finally, she came out and sat down across from me. Her hands were swollen and red. Her face and arms were splattered with blood. Her chest was heaving. We just stared at each other without saying anything. After a while, I asked her, "Is he gone?" She looked back at me and answered, "I really hope so." I nodded. That was all there was to say about that. I understood how she felt perfectly. I felt the same. I didn't know what to do, so we just sat there waiting silently. Eventually, my wife started crying and went to go take a shower. I just stayed where I was, holding our daughter. After a long while, I heard moaning and sobbing coming from our room. It turned out that my son wasn't dead. I went in to see how bad it was, and it was pretty bad. I've never seen a more merciless beating laid onto anyone, before or since. He was lying on the floor, rolling on the floor, his face battered, barely recognizable. His face was swollen and bruised. Both of his eyes were swollen shut and starting to blacken. I could see that a couple of his fingers were bent at weird angles, and he had wet himself. I think he must have been missing teeth, but I couldn't see any on the floor, and I couldn't see inside his mouth. His lips were all puffed up and swollen. From talking to my wife about it later, I know now that she had systematically beaten every part of his body, focusing heavily on his legs. She told me she kicked him repeatedly, focusing on his legs, until her legs got tired, and had kept beating his body long after he had passed out. When my wife came out of the shower, I still didn't know what to do about our son. I didn't know whether to call the police or an ambulance, take him to the hospital myself. I honestly didn't have any idea what to do. After a while, I realized I simply didn't care what happened to him anymore. And we decided to just let him live or die on his own. There was an in-law suite in the basement that we had never really used, and my wife, my daughter, and I just moved down there. We ceded the top floor of the house to my son, locked everything down, separated our lives entirely. There was plenty of food in the upstairs cabinets, enough for a couple weeks or more. He had a washroom and bedrooms to use. We had a washroom in the basement, a small kitchenette, and a separate entrance. So we just stopped going upstairs. We decided we were done with him. I figured we'd let his food run out and see what happened. Over the next week, we could hear him moving around upstairs sometimes. I think he just spent most of the time lying in bed, recovering. I went to work, watching on high alert in case he attacked me in the driveway. But he never did. My wife stayed home with our daughter. She was never out of our sight. One night, we heard him going ballistic, smashing things, banging. We didn't respond. He never tried to get downstairs, never tried to get near us. I think he was afraid that if he got near us again, my wife might finish the job on him. After 3 weeks down in the basement, we hadn't heard anything from above for a few days. I ventured upstairs to the main floor of the house. The place was demolished, and there was no sign of my son. He was gone. It took months to repair the damage he had done and get the main floor back to normal again. There was food and dung smeared all over the walls, broken glass on the floor, big holes in the drywall. He had ripped the place apart. He tore up the linoleum in a corner of the kitchen and emptied an entire foam fire extinguisher into the living room. I feel thankful that he didn't burn the house down with us in it. I'm honestly not sure why he didn't. The kid wasn't shy about lighting things on fire. After that, I lived in fear every day that he would come back, that he would ambush us out of the blue and try to unalive us. We moved house about 3 years later, and I finally stopped being afraid he would show up again. As now, he had no idea where we were. I finally felt safe from him. All this happened a long time ago. My son was born in the spring of 1971. My daughter was born in 88. I'm an old man now. I'll be 70 this year. And my wife passed from cancer in 2016. My daughter is 31 now. I moved in with her and her husband after my wife passed. I've got 2 granddaughters, and they are the joy of my life. I see a therapist a couple times a month to talk about all this. I don't know where my son is. The last time I saw him was when he was lying on the floor of our bedroom, bleeding and smashed. I haven't heard from him since he left. More than 30 years now. I don't want to. I carry a lot of guilt from that time, and a lot of conflicted emotions. I didn't beat him myself, but I allowed him to be beaten, and I thought he deserved it. I was happy it happened. I didn't try to end him, but I would have been happy if he passed. I will say that I do hope he was able to overcome his demons and go live a normal life somewhere. If he wasn't able to do that, if he stayed the way he was, then I truly do hope someone out there stopped him. When I knew him, he was out of control. And whichever way it went, I just hope he isn't still out there, hurting anyone else.
The story disturbed many viewers. Some said it felt like something straight out of a horror movie. Others doubted its legitimacy, claiming it was simply too dark to be real. But the truth is, cases like this do exist. Children can be born with what doctors call conduct disorder. It's a condition where a child repeatedly breaks rules, defies authority, and deliberately harms others. This can mean hurting people or animals, destroying property, stealing, or committing violent acts. Some children eventually respond to treatment. Some grow out of it, but others never change. And in this case, that seemed to be the reality. Among the comments, one in particular stood out. A user claimed he might actually be the poster's grandson. He described his own father, born in the spring of 1971, cruel, violent, with the same physical description as the boy in this story. According to him, his father was a sadistic man. He unalived animals, set his hair on fire for fun, and used knives as punishment. The commenter said he carried scars from his father's abuse, and that he believed this story might explain everything about where he came from. He even asked the original poster to send him a private message to confirm if it was true, but the poster never replied. And to this day, the thread remains one of Reddit's darkest stories.